with your busy lifestyle, it would be hard to get out of the house, I'm sure, but still making it a priority, because when the kids are gone, it'll be both of you guys. And that relationship has to have a really good foundation, because they do absorb us, they swallow up our time, and then they're gone. And you're like, okay, hold up, come back here. And then like, okay, God, see you when I see you. And then it's mom and dad kind of there. So making the investments of time along the way, that's the biggest mistake that a lot of couples get into.
Hello and welcome to the Disrupt the Everyday podcast. We're here to help you navigate life while disrupting the status quo. Our discussions cover a number of topics relevant to everyday life. We discuss everything from relationships to entrepreneurship. We also engage in some difficult but important conversations. And now, here are your hosts, Brian and Tanya Hamilton.
Thank you for joining us for episode 5 of the Disrupt the Everyday podcast. Today, we're discussing all types of relationships, joined by Roxanne Derhodge. Roxanne, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk about couples relationship with a couple. That's going to be fun.
So we want to start off. You have been quite busy over the years. You have a book that we're going to focus on today, and it's called A Therapist Insider's Guide on Relationships. Can you share with us what you've been up to over the last little while before we really get in?
Well, I've been doing a lot of things. Like you said, about 6 years ago, I launched the first book, which is called A Therapist Insider's Guide on Relationships. And I dropped the subtitle, which was Healing in the Past. So it's just a therapist insider's guide on relationships. And since then, at that point, I'd been in corporate consulting with health and wellness for about 15 to 16 years prior to that. And before that, I was on the front line with the police and running addictions agencies and doing all that fun stuff. And since the release of the book, I've just been speaking and training related to relationships, either at home, and now I've shifted or included the corporate consulting piece with the new book that I'm going to be doing. So I do a lot of keynote speaking, training, consulting sometimes, because with companies, what happens is that people are your commodities at work. They want to keep everybody really happy and healthy. And we have differences at work, unfortunately. So it's about enhancing people's capacity to connect and communicate effectively. So that's kind of where I spend a fair amount of my time. I spend my time teaching individuals at home how to have really successful relationships, coaching on that end as well. And then the corporate sector, the same, but more with leaders in their teams.
All right. Now, before we actually get into couples relationships, I want to focus a little bit on, I guess, more of those friendships and how they change over time. Are there any common themes that you see a lot with individuals who maybe grow apart from a longtime friend, or, maintaining those relationships as they go on? Like, I'll just give an example. I've known my best friend since we were 12 years old, and we're 39 today. We still have a great relationship. We still talk regularly. But yeah, if you could talk a little bit about that.
Well, I think, friendships can be very, very intimate. If you talk about a best friend, and I have best friends. I grew up in Trinidad, and I have best friends that my youngest friend, I was like 4, and we're still connected. So I think developmentally, our friendships go through a lot of the same things, right? So your best friend's your best bud, right? That's that first person that's kind of the mirror image of, they want to do the same things you do, and that's the person that really, really primarily knows you in a sense of connection. And then as you evolve, obviously, you become a young adult, then you start to date, then you have to factor in kind of spending time with that friend, but having time for, say, the new girlfriend, or maybe go off to college or university. Now you're exposed to different people, the friendships are different then, but ultimately you're maybe still connecting in. That friendship has to evolve with where you're at, because I think you have to touch base with the friend, because maybe you're not having as much time because of what's going on. Then potentially you get married, then that person has to be able to adapt to that. I'm going to use the word system, because I'm a systems therapist, but really to some degree into this new system, be it a family, and whether I'm going to assume it's a he. If he's not on the same trajectory, there's going to be potentially things that you have to manage as friends. Maybe you don't have as much time to go out and, play football or hockey, or go out for the bears with the boys or whatever. Those friends have to be able to negotiate the things about what's it going to take for us to hang out, but also to ensure that they stay connected to what the needs are of each person's lives. Because, if you don't do that, what's going to happen is you're going to hit bumps, right? Because let's say it's a family, you have young children and all those things, and one person have them, or both of you have them. Now you both don't have any time. So you have to, it's like no different than negotiating needs in any relationship. You have to think, hey, I haven't seen you, and I seem to be the one that makes the time. I'd really appreciate the next time you pick up the phone. It's always me, kind of thing. So I think it's like any other relationship. Friendships can be very, when a friendship breaks up, it equally is as painful sometimes to some of the most connected romantic relationships. So I think needs, again, what are your emotional needs in that relationship? And maybe men don't think like that. I know women think like that, but really you have to think about what is it that you both enjoy being with each other, and when is it that you can fit in the time, and being aware of what each person needs in their lives so that they could continue functioning well in their lives as well, and integrating the lives as much as possible.
So you just said breakups, and you don't really look at friendships and having to break up, right? I look at, okay, that would be romantic relationships. Now, for adults, I'm thinking, when, like, how do we know? I mean, I guess it's going to be different for everybody, but my question would be, how do we know when it's time for a relationship to end?
Well, there's some definite things, obviously the ones that sometimes you can negotiate, right? If there's violence, sometimes if there's intense neglect through addictions, or, severe psychiatric, and you're trying to work at it and you're just not able to kind of hit the ground running. I think those at that point, you're like, okay, I have to make the best decision for myself. I often say that you can't get out of the pot as soon as the fire gets hot. And that's unfortunately what happens to a lot of couples today. I often say to new couples, look, here's the deal. You're going to plan the wedding, right? And that's stressful. And, you hear the bridezilla stories, and the fiance, the male saying, just tell me about where to show up and get my tux. And, that's not being married. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of younger people don't see the realities. Where do they have those discussions? 5 years out, right? When the honeymoon's done, you're in the jobs, maybe you got some young children getting up, every 2 hours or whatever. That's real, that's real marriage. And what are you going to do when, things don't stick? When things get hot, what are you going to do? How are you going to be there for your partner? And how's your partner going to be there for yourself? So I think what I find most valuable is for people to have conversations with people that are ahead of them in, the relationship kind of trend. So talk to someone older. Now, don't talk to somebody that's disgruntled, right? That says, "Oh my God, don't do it. You'll never have another free moment," all that fun stuff. But talk to people that you really would see as role models and say, I know Jane and Jim went through a rough time, and they seem to get through it pretty good. They seem to really get along. Seem to have made some shifts. I wonder what they've done. So I think those kinds of conversations, it doesn't always have to be so with someone like myself that has the professional background, but having real conversations with people that have been together long term, I think is very, very important.
For sure. Now, looking at breakups inside of friendship, how, I'm thinking if it's 10 years in, 20 years in, and you're realizing, maybe you're going apart or it should have happened earlier. How do you end a friendship?
I think really it's no different than when you're talking about your needs not being met in a romantic relationship. If you kind of know that feeling in your gut, right? Like when things are off and you're thinking, boy, I'm not feeling good in this space anymore, or this person's not available to me. I'm always the one, doing for that person. Relationships are about reciprocity, right? It's about give and take. And sometimes what happens is, like, maybe we maintain a relationship sometimes because we like helping. Let's say we're one of those people and we love helping people. And you kind of develop a really good friendship. But when you start to kind of grow, you realize, boy, I want to receive a little bit back. But this relationship has formulated its dance. So you're trying to receive back. But this individual's like, well, Roxanne, when I met you, you're always there for me. What do you want now? And maybe that person doesn't have that capacity to shift. That's where you have the conversations and say, hey, I love being with you. We seem to have a great time, but I feel like we're kind of on a uneven playing field. And I think good friendships are fantastic in life. And I think we have to, I want you to listen to what I'm needing in this friendship so we can evolve. Are you in? Can we talk about this? Right? Some people may say, hell no. And others may be like, you got a point. Let's talk about, what's not been feeling well for you. And if that person cuts you off, Latonya, to not want to hear that, then that point, I go, that's something you got to kind of put in your back of your mind. But I would say most people that care about you, they want you to be happy, like you want them to be happy, and they'd be open generally to have that conversation with you. So talk about it. Make sure it's in a good space. Make sure you're rested. Make sure you're thought through some concrete examples of when things didn't go well for you, so that when the person says, hey, tell me what happened there, you can say, remember when last week when, we were to get together and 20 minutes before I'd made all these plans for us and you bailed on me last minute. And, one time is not a big deal, but you know what? In the last 3 years, you've done that like 4 times. And I always seem to kind of let it go. And I feel like it's a pattern for us. And I kind of feel a little bit disrespected when you do that. Do you mean to disrespect me? And often people go, you know me, I'm not good with the clock. I go, okay, well, no problem. I got you. However, I'm just letting you know how it affects me. And, and if once a person acknowledges it, then you go, oh, great. So you weren't me trying to make me upset. No, I wasn't, absolutely not. Fantastic. So here's what I'm going to ask, and that's when your ask comes in. So the next time, if you think that you're in a tight spot and you really can't commit, please be upfront. We're good, you have agreement. So I think a lot of people are scared to have those conversations, because what if the person is going to say, well, I don't care, it's your problem, or those types of things. But I think just having those kind of, call them conscious conversations, become easier with time.
Now, in terms of friendships, if there's a situation where someone is keeping that relationship alive more so out of guilt, what are some of the negative impacts that can have?
Guilt's a tough one. So you have to go inside and say, what's the guilt about? Why am I maintaining this? Like, and how is that helpful? Guilt is, you always hear that's a useless emotion. You have to come to terms with, what's this guilt about with this connection? Why is it, where did it start? Where did that feeling of guilt start with connection? And how is it helpful and healthy? And I think if it's kind of, if it's one of those, oh, once in a while I feel guilty, that's one thing. But if it's a persisting kind of theme that impacts you internally and maybe other things in your life, then at that point, you really have to start to get quiet and listen and say, what is this friendship bringing to me? How is it affecting me? And what is it that I need different for myself? So you have to start to listen. I always say we all have, we can use present day terms. We have that GPS in our tummy, right? That tells us when things are off track, and it doesn't lie, right? It doesn't lie. So really kind of sit in silence. And I think that's something, 85% of our behavior is unconscious, if you think about that, right? So we actually kind of oftentimes work from a non-conscious space. So when you quiet your mind, you really start to reflect on things in quiet and say, why do I act like this in this friendship? What am I afraid of? And start to really sit and just write about it without thinking about it. The answers will come. And at first people go, okay, Roxanne, I sat there with that piece of paper, nothing happened. You have to do it a bit often, sitting in silence with trying to figure out things, because we have too much noise in our society today. So whether it's when you're going for your walks, you're having that morning coffee before the world kind of, lights up, start to think about the things that are important and reflect, because those values within you are there. You know what you value, you know what you believe about things that are important to you. But sometimes, because we're kind of not sitting with silence, we kind of keep relationships going that maybe need to be altered, or maybe some of them need to be discontinued as well.
So let's go back to the book and the beginning of it. You talk about the blueprint in our lives. Can you share with us more about that?
Sure. So I often say that when we come into this world, we're perfect. Meaning that children come and they're just like a little piece of clay, quite literally like a little piece of clay, right? That you can mold. And generally, most kids that come in, if you think of your children, and I know you both have children, you got to kind of figure them out really kind of quick, right? Is this a I'm tired cry? It's a I want to hug cry. It's a I need to be fed cry or change. You learn really quickly what their needs are, right? So you get attuned, and we call it attunement in relationships. So that if you think about it, right, like you learn, and the different personalities in those relationships, you learn about the different personalities relatively quickly with your children. So that's how early relationship starts, right? And our kids expect us to meet their needs because we're listening and we're adapting. Maybe you have, the one that can't sit still, you have the other one that sits in the corner and drawers and has fun, those types of things. So what happens is that blueprint starts from the time we're born. And I mean, some psychologists like me would say it's even attunement when you're pregnant, because that baby's listening to that environment. And then what happens is then we start to develop. Ideally, what we want is a secure, safe, attached space. In attachment, there's the forefather of attachment, his name is Bowlby. He talked about that as human beings, we're meant to evolve into just who we need to be, but we need help. So if you think about your guys or children, they need you. They need you to kind of go, okay, don't go running into incoming traffic, you're going to get smucked. And when they're two, but as they start to evolve, you kind of create the space around them to make them safe and secure so they could stay within themselves to listen, right? And if you think about a lot of people that are indecisive, it's because something in their lives along the way started to, I call it pricking and prodding at them, that disconnected them from going inside to listen to what's good for them. So then if you think about it, we start to develop with our thoughts or psychologically, very young, right? So, you think about the young ones are very creative and there's dragons and fairies and, all that stuff. And then they start to kind of realize, wow, like the world runs around me, doesn't it? It's like I'm this is my world. And then as they start to evolve, they start to want more autonomy, meaning they want to be able to be independent. And so long as they have that safety, they're going to evolve into who they need to be psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, and obviously biologically, right? Within a context of basic needs are met. Unfortunately, I would say that most of us have had stuff in our life. I don't know about you, but most people, my life was less than ideal. So we start to adapt or cut off from things sometimes, right? So that we can, deal with the situations. What happens is it's kind of like a blueprint gets set in relationships along the way. So let's say maybe there is inconsistency. So you learn really, maybe your parenting situation wasn't very consistent. So maybe you learn to be super responsible very, very young, maybe too young. So that might be a theme that you need to look at. Maybe so if things were less than ideal, those develop themes. Maybe there was some trauma. So I'm going to be kind of casing the world, just looking to see, can I trust this person? Can I trust this situation? And the term we use is called hypervigilance. So it's really about recognizing, if you grow up in a safe, secure home, you're going to be able to listen to that internal gut switch and say, is this good for me? Or is it not good for me? And be able to deliver, asking for what you need and also getting the reciprocity back. Unfortunately, I would say 65% of the world haven't had ideal upbringings. So they bring that to the context into present day relationships. So that's why I talk about the blueprint. What is your blueprint of relationships? Did you grow up in a loving, kind relationship? Maybe there was a death. Maybe there was socioeconomic strife. Maybe you had to move to North America when you were young against your will. Lots of different variables. And then what is that story? What's your lifestyle story? And sometimes when you kind of write that out or plot it along a line, you might say, oh, my parents separated when I was 7. Okay, what was that like? Oh boy, they didn't talk again. And visitation was rough, right? And I always had to be one way at dads and one way at moms. So once you start to kind of look at it like that, you might understand what kind of things might I bring forward to my current relationships, sometimes not knowingly. And we might be repeating things in the present when we get triggered. Let's say we had uncertainty and we get around someone, and maybe that person is triggering us. Maybe it's not that the person's not a good person, but we haven't kind of dealt with that feeling uncertain. So we might bolt from that person versus kind of going, I need to find out a little bit more about that person. They've got good qualities. They've got some of the things I want in a relationship, but they scare me. But why do they scare you? Is it because they're not good for me? Or is it because I'm scared to get to a level of intimacy? Because every time I get close to people, maybe I'm that one of those kids that their parents separated when I was 7, things don't turn out right. So maybe deep down inside, I better bolt now. So it's kind of understanding kind of the blueprint is ready, your life story. What are some of things in your life? What relationships were you exposed to? Did you see kindness and gentleness? Did you see a lot of uncertainty, or was that something that was you kind of few and far between?
In terms of marriages, the statistics will show, depending on the source that you're looking at, give or take 50%, a little bit greater, a little bit more, end in divorce. What do you see are some of the common themes that lead to these breakdowns in, these very intimate relationships?
Unfortunately, I'd like to say infidelity is one of the biggest ones, financial concerns, but I think below it all, what happens is life gets busy, right? So if you kind of think at the beginning of any relationship, you have lots of time, right? You lie, like you stay up till 2 o'clock in the morning talking to this person because you can't wait to find out more about them. And then life sets in, and there's two really, really high stress times in couples' lives. That's when their children are young and when their children are leaving home. So those 2 points are when they're young, just think about it. You're busy and you're raising them, and you're trying to maybe get a date night on if you can. And what happens is a lot of people, they put that on the back burner. We will when they're old enough. And I often say to couples, make that time. And that being said, we're in COVID and you can't leave your living room. But even when your kids are asleep, or if you get up earlier than them in the morning, make that time for each other, just to talk about, not about who's going to pick up the groceries and so-and-so's got T-ball, but just about you guys. How are you doing? Like, how are you feeling? What's on your mind? Anything been bothering you lately? And that's really what intimacy is. It's about understanding the internal space of the person in front of you. And the only way you're going to do that, people say, well, we talk all the time, Roxanne. We live in the same house. And I'm like, okay, no. You tell me what your biggest worries of your wife is right now. What's she really looking forward to? What are some of her dreams? What are her goals? What pissed her off yesterday that bothered her? And those are the things, those are the conversations that I think, unfortunately, start to whittle away at relationships, Brian. People don't savor that time because they think, oh, we're going to get into a fight. You're going to have differences. You're going to have conflict. But unless you don't start to learn how to communicate about that other person's space, how are you feeling about things with us? We all good? Is this partnership feeling well? Or you really disappointed me when how you handled that with our son yesterday, and I'm a little bit upset with you, but I'm just going to let it go. So I think what starts to happen is people get in, and the first thing when I see couples, I will say to them, how often? Tell me the last time you sat down, undistracted, and talked about your relationship, and what percentage do you think says yes?
I'm going to say it's a very low percentage, probably close. I'm going to estimate around 10%.
Yeah, 5 to 10. And then they go, well, why do we have to do that? And I go, well, do you go to the dentist? Do you go get your eyes checked? Do you go to your doctors at least once a year? We go everywhere else to make sure everything's on track. But where do you go to make sure that you're on track? And then they go, oh, okay. And it's very painstaking. And I make them put alarms on their phones. And they go, oh, this is horrible, Roxanne. This sucks. I go, yeah, of course it's going to suck, because you're going to talk at a different level, right? You don't just talk when problems are happening. You talk about what's good. Oh my God, I loved when you made that awesome meal last week, that was fantastic. And when the kids funny, they barely sat down, and then it was us, and you think, oh my God, I cooked this meal for 3 hours, and they sat there for 10 minutes, and boy, they're ungrateful. Whatever it is, so that you have that joining moment more often. So I would say that's the one thing. And a lot of people let small things build up. So a small thing becomes a thing because they haven't been dealing with things, right? And I think too, a lot of people haven't sat down and talked about, they know their values supposedly, but they haven't sat down and talk about what are couples, what do we value as a couple? And how's that going for us? Because I think it's not working so well for us. And I think the more you start to treat it like that, you can go back to those times when you say, "Oh, I feel like we're kind of prickly lately." Let's face facts. I love you, but I don't like you so much lately. So let's try to spend some more time together. So those are some of the key things that I find. Unfortunately, as a couples therapist, what I see is that when people quit having sex, which nobody wants to talk about, that's when they show up in an office like mine, because that means that the disconnection is so immense, and now they're not having that sexual intimacy. That's what then gets people into an office like mine.
I totally agree. Like, I'm thinking back, it's funny because Brian and I now spend the most time I think we've ever spent together because we both work from home. And some days you do find, and things are going well, but sometimes it's that, oh yeah, we've talked about our day, we've talked about the latest meeting, or this, that, and the next thing, but that connection, right? Like, I almost think of it as the debrief at the end of the day. And sometimes, yeah, we're just so tired, we're sitting across from on the couch and doing whatever, we're playing on the phones. Right. But then you do realize after, it's been maybe a day, or the next night, it's the same thing. It's like, whoa, you feel that connection, and it's starting to, phase out, and being really in tune with, okay, let's like put everything down. Let's talk about ABC, nothing to do with work or the podcast, what have you. Right.
Right, especially with you two working together, that's even a more importance, right? It's not about, and you say to the kids, how old are your children?
So our oldest is 12 today, and then we have,
happy birthday.
yeah, it's a good day. And then today, our twins are 9, and then we have a 4-year-old.
Okay, so you're hitting every stage,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So with the 4-year-old, you can't say mommy and daddy need alone time, but when the 4-year-old's in bed, you could negotiate with the others. And you say, why don't we just sit down and talk and laugh, or watch something funny together, or it doesn't have to be long pockets of time. It just has to be a habit.
For sure.
And when you put it, like anything else, we don't miss meetings, do we?
Mhm.
Right? Because we schedule them. Schedule it, because it's like anything else. We prioritize ourselves last. Everything else gets done, and start to talk about things. You say, what's one great thing about this week? What's one not so good thing about this week? Is there anything you'd like to talk about today? No, I'm good. Anything? And then you've checked in. So I think if it becomes more practice, it eventually, when something big is coming at you, you've had the practice of talking about things often enough, so it doesn't turn into, when couples get into disdain, you know what that is? Like, I don't want to hear you breathe, all that stuff, or contempt. At that point, it's harder to come back. And by the time someone comes to me at that point, it's unfortunate that, because the pain has persisted so long that it becomes more difficult to go backwards. So I always say to people, it's your job, right? If you realize something's off, you just say, hey, something's off. You got to call it, even if you don't know what it is, or Latanya the same. Whoever sees it first, even if they don't know what it is, they got to call it and say, something's not right. I know we got this going on, but tell me when we can chat. Right. And, that's when you can take that 15 minutes or that half an hour to go for a walk or do whatever in this time, because you can't go out as we used to. And obviously with your busy lifestyle, it would be hard to get out of the house, I'm sure, but still making it a priority, because when the kids are gone, it'll be both of you guys. And that relationship has to have a really good foundation, because they do absorb us. They swallow up our time, and then they're gone. And you're like, okay, hold up, come back here. And then like, okay, God, see you when I see you. And then it's mom and dad kind of there. So making the investments of time along the way, that's the biggest mistake that a lot of couples get into.
I like that. And I know date nights have always been important for us. And
Mhm.
also I think people looking at it doesn't need to be an expensive dinner. It doesn't, like our last date night, last Friday night, we went to Home Depot because we're doing renovations and we just couldn't go with all four kids and we needed to be able to think and look out. And then, we grabbed some takeout and sat in the van, right? So I think when people overcomplicate things, that's when it just doesn't happen. Right. So
Make it real. So I
yeah.
think that's so right? It could be that, okay, guess what? We're going to grab a coffee and go sit in like you said, your truck or your car
Yep.
and talk. We're going to go 2 streets over because the kids don't see that we're in the driveway because they're going to need you. And, and just, it doesn't have to be something with bells and whistles. And I think going back to my whole concept of marriage, what do the movies show, right? Like they always show the big blow up and the happy ending. And so unfortunately, sometimes life has lots of things that sometimes are not happy. So you have to be able to be each other's biggest cheerleader, because you're going to need that person when big things happen, like deaths or sicknesses or financial concerns or problems with the kids, or whatever, or school problems or whatever. You need each other. You need your cheerleader even more as you go through life together.
That's awesome. I really appreciate that.
Now, you touched on one thing. You said it's the problem that nobody wants to talk about, nobody wants to address, and you find people that are ending up in your office are a lot of times people who they've had the intimacy just kind of disappear or dissipate from their relationship. So in those situations, again, like you said, I'm sure a common problem that just doesn't get enough attention. Where do you start with a couple that's in that position?
Well, I back them out of the bedroom. I often say, as much as you like to get in there, let's back out. Let's back out of it and let's talk about really the state of things with you. Like, how did you meet? Let's like, because what happens is with as human beings, what we do with problems is, we look at just the problem, right? And we forget all the other things that could maybe good around us. And so I start to talk about them as people. Like, tell me who you are. What did you like to do as a kid? And they don't want to talk about that at first. They're like, okay, there's a problem here and you're wasting our time. I go, no, 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 no. We need to get to know you as people, and how you met. What did you like to do together? What did you find really attractive about Brian when you met him? What was his best quality? Because what you're trying to do is to back them away from just focusing on what's not right. Because oftentimes there's a lot of things that are right, but some of these things are not going well. So that's what we try to do, is kind of, what's the aerial shot? They're going into the microscopic sliver of what's wrong. That's if there is something small. Sometimes it can be big. And then we start to talk about, first of all, do you love each other? And I often hear, I love him or her, but I don't like them. I go, well, we can buy in on that one. And, are you willing to work really hard? Because marriage is hard. You guys have been together a long time. It's hard work. It's not for the faint-hearted. Sometimes it's easier. People go, okay, if I end this one, I start over, I have a new beginning. But the same issues are going to come prop up again if you don't deal with them, right? So I think that's the part that we do. And then we just really start to talk about, what is the problem? What are the exceptions to the problem? When is it that you don't have the problem being an issue? And have them start to connect to them, each other's people. Because if you like the other person, the intimacy in the long run doesn't get become an issue. But if you don't like the person, the last thing you want to do is to be in that intimate space with people. And if there's been stuff that's, the term is disillusionments, if there's things that have developed, if there's been infidelity, if there's differences around money, if there's differences with family, if one person maybe has been out of work, all that stuff, that life stuff has been piling up and nobody's been dealing with it. Right. So I said, then we got the huge, pink elephant in the room. Oh, no, 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 but I just want to have sex. Okay, great, great, great. That's good. Okay. So I'm going to tell you, go home, have sex 3 times, and you tell me if things are better. Oh, got it. And then I go, okay, would you like me to write out a prescription? I'll joke around with them. Once they can't laugh with me again, because sometimes they're not laughing early. And then they go, yeah, yeah, I see. We see your point. We got to learn how to just like each other again and not be so resentful and angry. And then when I could see the person without the lens of the anger and animosity, and sometimes there's forgiveness needed. and repair. Sometimes you don't know that you've hurt the person. It may not be something like infidelity, but maybe you don't back up the person on parenting. And now you're having children playing against each other. And you've kind of bailed out on that other parent a long time ago and you didn't realize it. And that other parent has maybe been having a tough time parenting or, with the child. So there's could be lots of ways that you kind of abandon the other person in the relationship. It doesn't per se need to be just infidelity. And, it's about talking about those nuances about when's the first time you felt really disconnected and what was going on and what was happening between you. Tell me the story. And when you start to get those stories, what happens is it paints a picture of maybe potentially why people are where they are. And if it's an individual issue, like an anxiety or depression or substance or whatever, that person needs to obviously concurrently deal with that if they're willing to bring their best version of themselves to the couple's therapy. I don't know. I told you a whole lot there in a short time. Is there any clarification that I can make there?
No, I think it was straightforward. I know we're getting close to our time. This has been great. I'm sure everybody who's been listening is thinking, wow, we've just been in Roxanne's office for the last 30 minutes.
Quite literally. We're on my studio side. The other side is my coaching.
So no, it's been a lot of really good information for just friendships and maintaining our intimate relationships. So at the beginning, you shared with us what you've been up to. Where can we find you?
Well, you can find me at roxannederhodge.com. So this year I'm wanting to speak and train on the new book, which will be coming out in about 2 months, and the title is just being finalized, but it's Authentic Heart Leadership, Impacting Teams and Not the Bottom Line from the Relationship Base. So that's my goal this year, is to get the book out, speak as much as I can on the content. And I just love, seeing the connections when they're made with people, whether it's at home or at work. Because once people get the skills, what happens is it makes things so much easier. And when you don't have the skills, to sometimes give yourself a pause is a good thing as well too. So, but seeing people develop those skills is something that I really am passionate about.
Yeah, and it's interesting, the work you do. There's a lot of correlation or overlap when you look at the things that are important in being an effective leader. It's it's the same things that are important in being effective in your relationships and just effective as a person, not the least of which in terms of importance is self-awareness.
Right, because 65%, when I was in the employee assistance program field as an executive, 65% of issues that keep people awake from work are relationships. So that's so if you think about it, we need relationships, right, to function. And, gone are the days where they thought that you leave your personal self at home and you bring your work self to work. We're a whole person. And the better we are able to relate to ourselves, we're able to then in turn relate a lot better to others. So
as we're wrapping up, I know we covered a lot of different topics here and kind of jumped around as we were going through, but is there anything else that you'd like to share?
Well, I would say that one of the things that is a good first step for couples is to really, if they don't know how to communicate, try to learn some basics. Like read an article, go to something like Psychology Today, or they can pick up a copy of my book online, and I also have a course on relationships, but learn the basics of communication. Know what it is to really communicate well, and really start to learn some basics like paraphrasing and summarizing and those things. Those are some basic things. And you can pick that up pretty much if you just make sure your source is valid. Learn some basics about how to learn to read someone's nonverbals and their verbals. And if you realize that your skill is not so high, try to practice it. And practice it with people that like you at first, and move on to the people where things are a little bit more contentious. So.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Roxanne.
Well, thank you so much. It's so nice to meet you, and good luck with the show. And if ever I can come back on, because there's a particular topic, I'd love to spend some more time with you.
Oh, we would love to have you again.
Thanks for listening to the Disrupt the Everyday podcast. For more ways to listen, connect with us on social media. To be a guest or to partner with us, check out our link tree at Disrupt the Everyday. Join us next time for more ways to disrupt the everyday.